Royal icing flowers are a great way to add drama and spice to any set of cookies. They look really impressive, but they're surprisingly easy to make. The principles I'm going to teach you in the video today can be applied to any kind of royal icing flower making, but I'm going to be showing you this cool variegated set where it looks kind of stripy and really realistic. So come along for the video today. If we haven't met before, I'm Sarah Grace from Sarah Grace Cookie Company. I teach beginners how to make beautiful sugar cookies like the ones you see on your screen now. Let's start with the icing. To get that variegated look where it looks like the petals have two tones in them, we're going to be using two different colors of icing in each bag. I'm filling a disposable piping bag with a little bit of white around the outside. I'm using a palette knife just to kind of spread that around the outside of the bag while inside the cup. And then I'm going to fill that in with a little bit of red. I achieve this red by adding lots of Wilton Crimson, a little bit of blue, and some brown to my fresh out of the mixer royal icing. Now when you're getting your icing ready for piping any kind of flower, you want to make sure that you're using fresh out of the mixer icing. You want to make sure that you've made the icing fresh that day so that it's nice and puffy and it's full of life and it doesn't look deflated, because if the icing sits for a little while on the counter, it's going to start to kind of separate and it's just not going to look as good for flower petals. You'll also want to make sure that you use a royal icing recipe that uses meringue powder. I have a recipe I really love on my website. I'll link it in the description below. And you want to make sure that you're whipping your icing to stiff peaks. When you finish filling the bag, just squeeze it until you can see that both colors are coming through. Then reincorporate that back in. I'm about to repeat this process, except this time I'm going to put the red on the outside of the bag. Then I'm going to fill with white. Again, squeeze the bag until you can see both colors coming through. Normally I would be using tipless piping bags, but today I'm using disposable bags because I'll be using a metal piping tip. Later I'll make some green that's going to go in a tipless piping bag because I like to use tipless for my leaf shapes. But for flower piping and piping flower petals, my preference is disposable bags with a metal tip. You can learn more about piping bags and piping methods in one of my other videos. I'll link that in a card up top and also in the description below. I've made a peachy color using a little bit of orange and the red that was left in the bowl, as well as just a tiny bit of chocolate brown. Then I'm going to repeat the whole process from before, where I line the bag with white, and then we're going to alternate that, and I'm going to line a bag with the peachy color and then fill it with white. You'll notice I haven't added a piping tip to either of these bags. I like to go ahead and make a couple of bags of icing, and then I make a separate bag that holds my piping tip. Then each of the icing bags get placed into the piping tip bag that's empty, and then I can interchange them as needed. Now I'm mixing up a lighter green. When I'm doing florals, I like to do two different tones of green. Usually I'll do a lighter color by mixing in a little green and blue to change the tone a little bit, maybe a little white if I want it to be nice and light. You can also add purple to your greens to make them have that pretty eucalyptus color. I'm placing this in a tipless piping bag, that way I can make those pretty round leaves with it. Next I'm going to make a darker green, and this is going to be used for the leaf shapes. They're going to look like those classic cake leaves because we're going to cut our tipless piping bag in a V shape at the end. That's going to give us that leaf look. For this particular green, I'm using some Sunny Side Up Bakery green icing, as well as a little bit of black Americolor and some blue from Wilton. If you'd like to learn more about royal icing and the different consistencies that are used for different decorating tasks, you can check out my new video, Royal Icing 101. Now for the fun part, we're going to decorate some flower cookies. I've slowed this video down just a bit so that you can see the motion of the piping tip. I used a Wilton 102 for this particular flower, but any mid to small size piping tip, petal tip, will do the trick for this. You want to make sure that the large end of the piping tip is toward the cookie. So I kind of almost rested on the cookie, but I don't want to dig into the cookie at all. I'm holding my wrist so that it's holding the narrow end of the piping tip in an upward direction. And I like to give it a little wiggle as I'm making that arc, as I'm wiggling around and turning my cookie turntable, so that it kind of gives the petal a little bit more of that lacy edge. I highly suggest investing in a cookie turntable. They're not terribly expensive. I think I got this one for $4 on Amazon, and it makes piping flowers so much easier. But if you don't have a turntable handy, you can always just turn the cookie a little bit or hold it in your hand and turn it as you pipe. I just continue making those petal shapes until I get to the very center. And you can see how those two colors are making that flower look like it has so much more dimension. Now I'm going to make some of those cute little teardrop leaves with this light green icing. I just squeeze for a couple seconds and then pull back to make that teardrop shape. Squeeze and pull back. Squeeze and pull back. This is my favorite flower cutter from Sweet Silhouettes. I absolutely love this one. I use it in almost every set of cookies I do. I think boys' birthday parties are the only time I don't use a flower cookie cutter. Even then, I'm still like trying to find a way to use a flower. For these leaves, I did that same shape. I just made the tail a little bit longer. So I squeezed 1, 2, and then pull back. And I just kept squeezing as I pulled back to make that longer leaf shape. Next, we're going to use the tipless piping bag that we've cut in a V at the end. You can see that V shape. I'm just going to squeeze and kind of wiggle it as I pull away from the cookie. That's a really easy way to get some beautiful big leaves, and those two different tones of leaf colors really make the cookie look more realistic and more like a real flower that you'd see in nature. For the next flower, we're going to start by adding a center in the middle of our cookie. Then we're going to build the petals out from here. So you'll notice that my hand is kind of in a different position than it would be if I were making, say, roses for a cake. You're not so much holding your wrist up and curving in. Your wrist is probably going to be facing the ceiling or close to it. You're holding your hand kind of upright and parallel with the cookie. This is going to allow you to reach that flat kind of plane, and you're just going to build out petals from there. You're kind of thinking about making a letter N, except if you were holding the pencil really weird with your hand in a fist with your wrist facing upward. But think about that arch of the letter N as you're making this piping stroke. We're going to add a few more leaves. You can get creative with your leaf shapes. This is just kind of a reverse teardrop where I squeeze and pull back. You can do some of the cute little berry shapes and the twigs and all those cute things if you want to. Get creative with it and enjoy it. I think the greenery is one of the most fun parts about piping flower cookies, because you can really find ways to make a cookie look interesting and a little different. Now, if you don't have the Sweet Silhouettes cutter or a specific flower cutter, no worries. You can just use a circle or a square, and you can build out some greenery from beside the flower. Or you don't have to have greenery at all. You can just do a flower. On this next one, I'm doing my greenery first, and I'm doing some kind of aloe vera looking leaves, I guess. I just do a big long squeeze down at the bottom and then pull up from there as I'm squeezing the bag, so that I've got these kind of thick looking leaves that point out at the top. This is going to be a side facing flower, so I'm doing a big arch at the top, and I'm going to do another layer of that arched kind of ruffly shape. I'm building up some icing in the center so that I can come in with my light green and add some dots. This is going to be the center of the flower. Next, we're going to grab our red piping bag again, and we're going to make the outer leaves that are going to be coming up around that center. You want to make another row of petals that look like they're wrapping around the existing petals, so that you kind of have the side view of the flower. You can go in and fix it with the piping bag if you need to, but don't worry, we're going to have some leaves all around here, so it won't be super noticeable. I'm making some nice big green leaves, again, so that it looks like we're looking at the side of the flower. And a couple going kind of up onto the flower, as if this were kind of nestled into a rose bush or something. The flower I'm going to show to you today is going to be a cluster of flowers, and I think it kind of looks like a hydrangea. So I'm just making a few of these small little flowers by piping these little bitty arches. The size of your arch is going to determine the size of your petal. So if you're doing a really small arch shape, like I said, that letter N shape, or an upside down U, however you want to think about it, rainbow, arch, whatever. If you're doing a really small one, you're going to get a really small petal. If you're doing a really large one, you're going to get a really large petal. So just do small ones going around in concentric circles. I like to do 5 petals because I think that looks really natural. Anything with odd numbers is going to look like it came from nature. Then after I get a few of those flowers established, each one doesn't have to be complete. You can do just a couple of petals here and there as well, and I think that makes it look even more realistic, because when you're looking at a hydrangea or a cluster of small flowers, you don't always see every part of every flower. And I'm going to add some little centers to the flower. I like to say that anytime you add a center, it's going to look like a flower. Any kind of blob of icing looks like a flower when you put a center on it. And when in doubt, put a flower on it. I'm adding a little greenery in between each of the flowers. And then I used this light colored green piping bag to kind of make some pointed leaves as well. Thank y'all so much for joining me today. If you like this video and you love cookie decorating content, then wipe the icing off your hands so you can click like or subscribe. You can also push the bell button so that you get notified each time I post a new cookie decorating video. Thank y'all. Have a great day. Bye-bye.